Okay, and it looks like the recording and transcription are now live and active. So good morning once again, everyone. Thank you. So this is module 1 of our PY 2024 EAP operation of our PY 2024 EAP training. And this module is going to cover operations and policy changes. The purpose of this training is to provide a broad overview of this year's EAP operational design and to inform you of major policy changes. And as part of this training, we will be reviewing operations updates, policy changes, and changes to forms. So let's dive right in with operations updates. I'm aware that this is probably going to look very small on your screen, but this is a general overview of major dates in the timeline of our program year this year. So the first date before the program year officially starts, we have set August 14th, 2023, that is a Monday, as the date that LSPs may begin distributing applications to the at-risk households. You may also begin issuing incomplete letters to applicants who have incomplete applications upon determination of incomplete status, regardless of that date. The next major date is going to be the official start date of the federal program year, which is October 1st. October 1st is a Sunday this year, so we're going to really kind of kick things up on the state level the next day, Monday, October 2nd. So that is the day on which you may begin distributing applications to any non-at-risk households within your service territory. This is also the date on which the online application portal will be opening. And this is also the date on which you may begin to schedule in-person appointments for those agencies who operate with in-person appointments. You just need to make sure that those appointments are not set to occur earlier than November 1st of 2023. November 1st, 2023 is the official start date of the statewide energy assistance program. And so what that means is that on that date, you can begin actually carrying out your in-person appointments. You can take walk-in crisis applicants. You can issue notification letters of benefit approval or denial to applicants who had already applied and had their applications completed and processed. You may begin making verbal or written pledges to utility vendors and fuel providers. You can begin sending transmittals to utility vendors or fuel providers. You can begin issuing crisis checks in-house to biofuel households in crisis, or wood vouchers for households that are purchasing biofuel from a vendor with whom you have an MOA. And you can begin sending executed transmittals to ICDA Fiscal for payment. The next big date on that timeline is December 1st, 2023. That is going to be a Friday this year. So December 1st is the beginning of the statewide utility shutoff moratorium. Just to review, under the moratorium, applicants are granted protection from utility disconnection by any metered utility vendors upon successful submission of an application for energy assistance until such time as household eligibility has been determined. So if an applicant applies, they are covered temporarily by the moratorium. If it's found that they do not in fact qualify, that moratorium protection does end. LSPs must notify utility vendors of a household's application if they are aware that a household is facing an imminent disconnection and they're not able to immediately determine eligibility. And documentation of such notification in a client file will count as crisis mitigation. So if someone applies after December 1st, they're up for disconnect, and you notify that utility vendor that that this household has submitted an application and is covered under moratorium. As long as you document that, that phone call counts as crisis mitigation. In order to meet your crisis mitigation requirement, you don't need to take any further action at that time. However, notifying the vendor does not relieve the LSP of the responsibility to prioritize eligibility determination of the households that are presenting with an energy crisis. Also, unless service is already disconnected and the benefit is insufficient to restore service, then you as a subgrantee must waive the requirement for a client contribution during moratorium because continued service is guaranteed by moratorium protection. However, you may encourage a client contribution, especially if you know that the benefit is not going to completely cover the arrearage. And vendors who indicate that they do not intend to observe moratorium protection should be reminded of their legislative requirement to do so. And if a vendor continues to indicate that it will not observe moratorium, then please escalate that that call to IHCDA so that we can address it with the vendor directly. So that moratorium protection does end at 11:59 p.m. on Friday, March 15th, 2024. That likely means that that utility providers are probably going to start back in with the disconnects on March 18th. So households who are running up against that might get a couple of days reprieve just because of the weekend. But technically, after 11:59 on Friday, March 15th, if they chose to, utility vendors may disconnect households regardless of eligibility status, including households who were previously approved and who are now in arrears. At that point, you may issue additional crisis to already approved households who are now facing disconnection, pending the availability of crisis funding, as long as they haven't gone through their entire allotment. And you may require client contributions for new applicants if the eligible benefit is insufficient to provide continuing service because the moratorium is no longer in place to guarantee that continuing service automatically. The application deadline for this year is going to be 5:00 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, May 20th, 2024. EAP Connect will be set up to stop accepting applications at that exact time. And applicants may submit incomplete applications, but they will have a hard deadline of returning any missing documentation of June 3rd, 2024. And all outstanding applications must have final eligibility determined and set to either approved or denied status this year by Monday, June 3rd, 2024. All those outstanding transmittals must be submitted to IHCDA Fiscal by Monday, June 17th, 2024. All vendors fully reconciled by Monday, July 1st, 2024. And of course, the official closing date of the federal program year will be September 30th, 2024. All right, so at this point, I'm going to take a break for any questions. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the raise hand function and we will address the questions in order. Asefa.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure you did see that there was somebody waiting to get in.
We do not have anyone in the lobby right now. I do see that. I do see that in the chat. We have Elaine who actually just got into the lobby, but the lobby was empty otherwise. So I don't know if someone maybe clicked on the wrong wrong training
I just think that
module.
it was It was just a pop up that said somebody was waiting. So if everybody's
Okay.
in, then
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Hi, Rosa.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Doing all right. How are you?
Uh, holding on. Just a quick question, and you might have answered it before.
Hmm.
What's the reasoning behind the transmittals not being able to be processed if the program or the applications can be taken October 1st? And are we able to process between October to November?
Yes, you are able to process. You are able to process during that time. The reason for the transmittals has everything to do really with the moratorium dates and guaranteeing that protection and guaranteeing that someone who is approved, an early applicant who's approved, doesn't become eligible for disconnection before that moratorium protection kicks in. So by not transmitting until November 1st, the thought is that you're going to be looking at having that entire extra billing cycle, and that applicant is not going to be able to have time to receive another disconnection notice and their kind of allotment of time to submit payment and be disconnected before December 1st. Um, and I know that a lot of our big six vendors, as a courtesy, they kind of automatically enroll people in a moratorium even before December 1st if they know they're qualified for the year. But the problem is that our REMCs and especially our uh, municipalities, usually are not able to do that. And so, in order to ensure that no one gets approved, but then gets disconnected before their moratorium protection actually kicks in, that's why we set that November 1st date for transmittals.
Okay.
And that's something that if we can come up with um, another solution on that, I think that that's something that uh, I'm happy to look at. I just want to be sure that we're not putting people in a situation where they get approved. We send the transmittal over early, and as a result of us sending it over early, their electric provider or their natural gas provider ends up disconnecting them before they get moratorium protection.
Okay.
But that's a great question. Thank you.
And is EAP Connect going to be up and ready? And
We are currently doing everything we can to work with rowing in order to ensure that all of the necessary enhancements are ready well in advance of the program year opening, but also we're trying to get them rolled out so that we have that August, I think, 14th date for the at-risk applications. So we're wanting you to be able to enter those applications as soon as you start getting them in. So we are working with rowing. We're actually having weekly meetings with them to try to get the enhancements rolled out as quickly as possible.
okay. And one last question.
Sure.
If we're able to process and the applicant we're working with is approved,
Hmm.
can we go ahead and print out the letter, just not mail it?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, whatever works for your agency in terms of that process. Yeah, as long as we just because of the timeline that we give people on, the funds will be sent by this date, and the transmittals, we definitely don't want them to we don't want the vendors to feel like, well, our customers know more than we do. And we also don't want to run afoul of, our letters say that this benefit will be paid out within this time frame, but then we're not able to abide by that because of our timelines. So that's why we delay those notification letters.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Ingrid.
Mine is transmittal related as well, and I get why we can't send them to the vendors and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But would you allow us to run self-pay transmittals once we start processing applications? Because again, it would be much easier for us to audit the shorter transmittals and just not submit them for payment until November 1st. By the time we run those transmittals November 1st, it's all hands on deck to, process disconnects and whatever other crisis applications. And so they take a back seat. If we could run transmittals in October and just start working on those already, it would take care of some of that backlog. And again, we would not submit them for
Sure.
payment until November 1st. But if I at least could run them a couple of times a week, it would make much more manageable transmittals on our end. And we would be able to get people paid faster that way too, which would cut back on those calls.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's certainly something that we can that I can discuss internally. Not going to make a call on that at this time, but I will definitely get back to you and the rest of the network about that once we've had a chance to have a discussion about that.
And, I would be glad to just run that as a, to test that if it works. So if
Okay.
it does make a difference.
Noted. Thanks, Ingrid. And Mary.
Good morning.
Morning.
So with the accepting applications from our clients by middle of August, and here it is the middle of July, we have a huge mailing project ahead of us. So just wanted to know when the estimated date would be for the new application and supporting documents to be available to us.
Yeah, I think I put that into an email last week, maybe when I sent out the manual. But I think if I remember right, I said that my goal was to get it out. My goal is to get it out by the end of next week, but certainly before the beginning of August.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Linda.
Last year, we asked Rowing if they could separate the at-risk labels from the regular labor labels. Do you know if that was done this year so we don't have to go through and sort them?
I do not know, but I know that we do have a meeting with Rowing. As I mentioned, we're having weekly meetings with them. So some of our team does have a meeting with them tomorrow, and so I can certainly Dana, if you can take a note to make sure that that gets asked tomorrow, that would be super helpful.
Thank you.
Yep. Angela.
Hey, just to touch on that, I just sent a ticket in to Danny yesterday and she sent me my labels back sorted in a matter of 10, 15 minutes. Just FYI.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully they also roll out a way for you guys to do it without having to submit a ticket, but it's good to know that that's an easy way to get them anyway. Brad.
I'll just tap into that. I've been working on the labels for probably about 3 weeks now. It's better to download it into Microsoft Word. Don't do it in any other because of spacing. The spacing is off. And if you select the current resident option, so just FYI there, I've had to fix some of the labels because of the spacing issue. And then I just went in and just reran the at-risk category and I'm just separating them out. I did not know Danny could do that, but next year I will keep that in mind.
Perfect. Thanks for that. All right. I am going to go ahead and move us forward. And so EAP Connect, as I think we all know, EAP Connect is Rowing's web-based interface. All eligibility determination and client tracking must be performed and documented within EAP Connect. And IHCDA is working with Rowing to roll out some large-scale enhancements for EAP Connect in order to improve efficiency, improve user friendliness, and improve functionality. Rowing will be training on these enhancements at a later date once the enhancements are complete. We have talked to them about the need for training this year, and they are on board with that. So I don't have dates on that yet, but we will be letting you know as soon as we have something, or you might be hearing that from Brad or Danny. Online applications. Applicants will continue to be able to apply 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from any computer or internet-connected mobile device through the online portal. So with that online portal, LSPs will be responsible to regularly monitor the online application portal for new applications, particularly for households in crisis, and to develop internal procedures to integrate online applications into their intake workflow. Online applicants are subject to the same rights and responsibilities as households who apply by any other method. All LSPs must provide a link to the online application portal on their website in order to facilitate equity of access. And this link will lead applicants to our landing page, which is http://eap.ihcda.in.gov. The reason that we want it to go to our landing page rather than directly to the portal is because there are, with our paper applications, we do have a number of kind of disclosures, rights and responsibility statements, appeal rights, et cetera, that is part of the application packet. We have the text of all that on this landing page, and when we have the applicant sign an application, they are signing they have received all that information. The only way that they're actually receiving that information if they're applying online is if they are going to our landing page as opposed to directly to the portal. So please, please, please ensure that that link is going to this landing page. Telephonic applications, IHCDA is continuing to partner with Protiviti contractors working with the state's 211 service in order to provide telephonic access to submit an application. The Protiviti contractors will submit an electronic application through the portal on behalf of the applicant. Unfortunately, as we all know, because of the telephonic nature of the application, Protiviti contractors do not have access to an applicant's documents in order to upload them. So Protiviti contractors have a script instructing them to inform the applicant of their responsibility to submit documents to the LSP within 14 days. The LSP must then follow up with a formal incomplete letter, as would be required with an incomplete application submitted via any other method. Note that telephonic applicants, like online applicants, are subject to the same rights and responsibilities as households who apply via any other method. Subgrantee agreements, always a hot topic. This year, we are currently projecting that we will be able to provide carryover funds to all LSPs in order to begin program year 2024 operations. Therefore, you should be able to submit grantee payment claims and transmittals immediately upon the beginning of the program year. So last year, we used that IIJA fund, which really was not very big and did not cover all of the all of the intended or all of the early accrued expenses, as well as we were hoping that would. This year, we're going to basically kind of the goal is to roll over the contracts, make some slight adjustments to them, but for the most part, allow you to use your carryover just starting October 1. We are working with legal on getting the language on those agreements so that we can have them in place before your current agreements expire on September 30th. So our goal here is a 0-day latency. We want you to be able to go right from one funding year into the next without having that uncertainty of when the funds are going to be released or when we're going to be able to get all the approvals to redistribute carryover. We want to eliminate all that uncertainty and all that waiting. Vendor MOAs. This is an MOA year for EAP, so all utility and fuel partners will be completing an MOA and updating their contact and banking information, regardless of whether or not they participated in program year 2022 or 2023. If you are aware of a vendor in your area that has not signed an MOA with us before, because again, we will be sending out automatically to everyone who's a currently active vendor. But if you're aware of anyone who's not currently active, please have them contact. We have a new contact email. It's vendors@ihcda.in.gov. That's just to remove those vendor emails from kind of your questions that you send us to the LIHEAP inbox, as well as any applicants who get that email address. So have them contact the vendors@ihcda.in.gov email address in order to have an MOA sent to them. We are still trying to eliminate paper MOAs. There's still a handful there hanging on to those paper MOAs, but we've made a lot of progress in turning everything to digital. And as a reminder, IHCDA does not enter into MOAs with wood vendors or other biofuel providers. However, you are more than welcome to develop your own MOAs in order to pay biofuel vendors directly using a voucher system. And more details about the vendor MOAs will be shared during Thursday morning's vendor session. Transmittals. IHCDA asks that all transmittals be sent to vendors electronically if possible. Please avoid using regular mail to send transmittals unless that is the only way the vendor states they can receive them. And ensure that you are notifying IHCDA of these exceptions. All claims must be transmitted to vendors within 14 calendar days of the claim approval date. And all transmittals must be corrected and sent to IHCDA Fiscal within 7 calendar days of receipt of approval from the vendor. It's not in this slide, but I have added an expectation on the vendor side that once they receive those transmittals from you, that they work to turn those around with any corrections and deletions and sign it and return it to you within 7 calendar days of them receiving it from you. Just because that was always kind of a missing part in this process to ensure that we're working on the timeline that we want to work on. And so that's something for you to be aware of, that that we are asking all vendors to review those and return them to you within 7 days. IHCDA does strongly encourage all subgrantees to adhere to a weekly schedule at minimum for both transmittals and submission of signed transmittals to IHCDA Fiscal. So the requirement is 14 days, but we do strongly suggest weekly, or some of you have very few vendors in your area, and all of your applicants go through the same vendor, and so you get very large transmittals quickly. So I know some of you do it actually more than weekly, and I do applaud all those efforts. LSP email. So this has been a suggestion in the past. This year it is going to be a requirement. Agencies are required to have an email inbox where applicants can send questions, requests for information, and other correspondence. It is encouraged but not required that agency also use this email for document or application submission. So I know that in the past there have been concerns about security with encouraging applicants to email documents, which is fine, but you do need to at least be accessible for questions or informational requests. There is a generic email for EAP on the ICDA end. Agencies should use the ICDA LIHEAP inbox for general correspondence, questions about guidance, sending back budget modifications, questions, etc., rather than emailing the manager or our analysts directly. And that email, of course, is the LIHEAP@ihcda.in.gov address. As far as the application goes, the new application forms will be made available to LSPs shortly. I can announce that there are minimal changes from last year's forms in terms of the application. We do encourage you to make a fillable PDF of the application. For agencies that lack access to a full version of Adobe to make those fillable forms, we can try to help you create those upon request. Just be aware, though, that that is going to be contingent on our availability at any given time, and any other tasks or requirements that we might be working on. We will allow LSPs to fill out applications over the phone without obtaining client signature, but notes must be made in the statewide database to indicate that that was how the application was obtained. And the application form must have the subgrantee's logo and contact information at the top. At a minimum, this must include a mailing address, a phone number, and an email address. Dates. The subgrantee must make a timely and accurate determination of the household's eligibility for benefits within the following timeline. For any in-person appointments that you might hold, that eligibility determination must happen within 14 calendar days of the application's completion. For mail-ins, that would be 55 calendar days of the application's receive date. And that time frame is going to start November 1st. So any application received before November 1st, 2023 would have to be processed within 55 calendar days of November 1st, which would be December 26th. We then have the received date. The received date is defined as the date an application an initial application is received by the LSP, regardless of what supporting documentation is included. If you actually receive an application, either a paper form that was mailed in or dropped off, a phone-in application, an online application, that would be the receive date. The LSPs must date stamp all incoming mail-in applications when received, and these applications should be processed on a first received, first served basis, crisis notwithstanding. The next date we have is the application date. The application date is going to be, so this is going over what's actually entering the EAP Connect. So the application date is going to be the date stamp on the application. The application date, in theory, should be the same as that receive date. The application entered date is going to be the date that an application was entered into the database. And the completion date is the day that the application was completed, which is defined in our manual as when you received the last piece of documentation that you're waiting on in order to be able to determine eligibility. The completion date must be entered into EAP Connect when you are entering claims. And just to review, so if someone sends in an application on November 14th and you don't get around to entering it into EAP Connect until November 28th. However, when you enter the application into EAP Connect, it was a mail-in, it was received on November 14th. Everything was there. And so everything is date stamped November 14th. Even though you're entering it on November 28th, November 14th would be your application complete date. So the 14th would be both the application date and the application complete date, only the application enter date would be different. If you need to send an incomplete letter to an applicant and then they get those documents back to you on December 5th, then December 5th would be what you enter as the application complete date. All right, next we're going to talk about closed accounts. So an EAP benefit can be applied to a closed account if the client received the pledge or benefit letter. If the client received the pledge or benefit before the account was closed. So for instance, someone applies on November 14th, they're approved on November 28th. You send them their letter on the 28th, and then they close their account on December 12th, but the transmittal goes out on the 13th. So since in theory, the vendor should be questioning you about that because it is already a closed account. As long as the account was open at the time that you gave the benefit notification to that applicant, the vendor should accept that pledge, that benefit, and apply it to any outstanding amount on the account. However, any benefit cannot be applied if the funds are pledged or transmitted to the vendor after the client has closed the account. So again, that transmitted, there's a little bit of wiggle room there because from the client's point of view, they already received notification. It's one reason why we do encourage you to try to do transmittals as often as makes sense for you. We want to try to get a quick turnaround on these benefits. And help to clean up any of this gray area that exists. But so there are two kind of standards there. There's when the client was notified and when the transmittal went out, because the transmittal is the official notification to the vendor. If a vendor does report that the account was closed and it's within days of that transmittal, I would really kind of try to have a discussion with the vendor as far as when exactly the account was closed and was that before or after the applicant was notified of their benefit. However, if the account was closed clearly before the benefit notification was given to the client, then vendors may not apply EAP benefits to closed accounts with an outstanding balance. And just keep in mind, benefits may only be awarded to accounts that are scheduled for closure or in final bill status if such a benefit will result in the account being reinstated or that final bill being canceled and service continued at the address of record. It all comes down to being able to document that we are giving the right benefit to the right person at the right address. So here's an example. A client closed an electric account and declared bankruptcy after submitting a mail-in application. The subgrantee transmitted a benefit 5 days after the account was closed. The utility vendor didn't catch that the account was closed when checking the transmittal, and the transmittal was approved. When the funds were paid to the utility vendor, it applied the funds to the outstanding balance. In this example, the vendor should have rejected the benefit on the transmittal. If it got through the transmittal process and was paid out, the vendor will have to send the entire benefit back to IHCDA. Individual checks. LSP should make every effort to have clients who receive a direct payment benefit sign up for ACH or direct deposit, or to waive their direct benefit to a utility that they pay separately. IHCDA's banking institution will continue to print and mail the checks and initiate direct deposits. If a biofuel client is in crisis and needs an immediate benefit, and the LSP does not enter into MOAs with biofuel vendors, then the LSP should be issuing the client an immediate crisis benefit and submit a claim for reimbursement to IHCDA. The LSP must include a list of clients who receive a crisis benefit with that claim submission. And for clients who have utilities included in their rent, once again, the threshold of monthly rent paid required in order to be eligible for benefit is $1. As long as they are paying anything or responsible to pay anything out of pocket, then the determination is that they have an energy burden when the utilities are included in the rent. So even if it's only $1, that's still an energy burden according to the federal definition. And I think this might be the last thing before we go to another question break, but we're going to look at the concept of household eligibility versus benefit eligibility. So if a household has been approved, but has a circumstance or circumstances preventing the awarding of a benefit, and examples of that could be inoperable equipment, an outstanding deposit on the account, etc., then this does not impact the determination of overall household eligibility. So essentially, household eligibility or program eligibility is a completely separate process from benefit eligibility. And intake staff must take care to distinguish between these two distinct parts of the eligibility determination process. So household or program eligibility may be used to determine eligibility for other resources and can qualify households for moratorium protection even if they don't qualify for benefit eligibility at this time. When a household, and if benefit eligibility is delayed because of some specific issue, such as inoperable equipment or an excessive credit balance, then when the household resolves that issue that's preventing the benefit payment, then household eligibility would not need to be redetermined. And finally, households must not be denied on the basis of not submitting utility bill documentation. And this is because we do have an agreement in our MOA with the vendors that they will provide all that information upon request. That is something that all vendors have agreed to. So if you receive any pushback from vendors on providing information that's required in order to determine eligibility either for the program or for a benefit, please let us know so that we can work with the vendor and resolve that misunderstanding of the requirements. For program year 2024, the administrative line item in the LSP budgets is unchanged from last year's level of 7.5%. And the outreach and eligibility determination line item is unchanged from last year's level of 4.5% of the total award. And we will be reviewing these in greater detail. I believe this module is going to be Thursday afternoon, so it'll be module 6 when we review the budget management. Apparently, I lied about the question break, but it is coming up soon. Water program. The low-income home water assistance program is officially no longer active. It currently is set to expire federally on September 30th, and it would require an act of Congress to renew it. And right now, I have not heard about any likelihood of that happening. As a result, all references to LIWAP have been removed from the application materials, the websites, and the manuals. However, if you find a reference that we may have missed, please bring it to our attention so that we can correct it. And we just want to thank you all for the tremendous work that you did these last couple of years to provide water assistance to Hoosiers. It was incredible to be able to roll out this new benefit. We really managed to help a lot of people, and hopefully we have an opportunity to do so again in the future. All right, and now question break. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Tom, couple quick things.
Yeah.
Is it possible, just as a matter of course, for IHCDA to provide the application as fillable? Because while I'm pretty good at doing some fillable forms, that application's trickier with even with Adobe, with all the little check boxes and all that.
Yeah, we can certainly work on that. I think where it gets, I think I just need to determine whether it's easier to, because we also need the agency information in that header, obviously. So I think it's just a matter of getting the order of that right. My understanding is it's easier to, I don't know. I need to look at it.
Okay, I didn't know if you could offer it as fillable and then we could still provide our agency information, but either way, that would be
Yeah.
great. A
Yeah.
couple other things. So for the application enter date, I assume that's still auto-populated, right? We're not populating that date.
That's my understanding that, yeah, basically EAP Connect, since it's when it's being entered into the database, EAP Connect just automatically enters that, which makes sense. That's one less thing for intake to do.
Right,
I'm all
good,
for
yeah.
automation.
Yeah, okay, and then finally, will you please, I'm sure you're probably already planning on it, but in your vendor training, will you stress both the expectation for the 7 days return on the signed transmittals, as well as making sure they understand the policy about closed accounts, just so that's less, on us to have to work with them about?
Yeah, absolutely. And Henry's actually on the call now, so I'm sure he's taking note of that. But yeah, we'll definitely make that make both of those part of our talking points during those presentations.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Brad.
Just want to touch base on the completed date. So if we, when we enter, let's say just in September, we complete it September 19th. Is that approval letter going to come out September 19th? Or are you still going to go back like last year and do November 1?
I need to review that. In my head, so usually it has to do with I believe the status, the approved status date. I would love to see those early ones populate to November 1st, since that's when we're actually sending out. And that's kind of when everything becomes official with the vendors. But I need to make sure I'm thinking through that right, and also make sure that what we're talking about is that the logic is present in EAP Connect. So would need to work with Brad and Danny and the developers at Rowing to ensure that that's functioning the way we intend it to.
Well, last year, that's the way it did happen. When we did approve it and complete it, we printed it. It did come out the same day we completed it, and then it got changed. All early ones were November 1st approval letters. So I just wanted to make sure that was happening again, and to also to reflect if it was an incomplete letter or an incomplete denial, are those going to come out the day we complete it, or is it going to come out November 1st? Because that does reflect the timeline.
Yeah, so the incomplete ones, so the denial should be November 1st. An incomplete letter should absolutely reflect when it's being printed, because you're giving people 14 days from that day.
Correct.
So
Okay.
yeah, that's good for us to know, to ensure that in our conversations with rowing, that the logic supports that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ingrid.
Can you, as you develop the documents that we send to clients with the applications, could we put in a very obvious spot that these are one-time payments, not monthly payments? And then with us not having the water program anymore, possibly add a note that statewide the water program has gone away, and that, you know, there's just no funding for that. Because I can see, well, number one, we've had a lot of calls this year of folks that were like, I didn't realize it wasn't a monthly payment. And then we will have folks questioning why we're not helping them on their water bills. And so I think if that can be added to the application right off the bat, or the materials that we send out, that would be really good. And I have to say, if you have it anywhere in the materials that it is a one-time payment, it's not easy to find, because I looked through them and I didn't find it. And
Fair
I think
enough.
that's a big enough one. It should be like really big.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank
I'll take a look at what we have, and I'll take a look at what kind of space we're working with. You know, just to be perfectly transparent, like I don't want to promise anything that I don't know 100% I'm going to be able to deliver. So that's why I'm kind of falling short of promising here. And I'm going to see if there's again, kind of a natural place to put that, and a place
Maybe
where
even
there's
on the
physical
approval letter.
space. Okay.
Yeah, so maybe even on the approval letter, because
Yeah.
if they say, I know you're helping me with $150. So if you read the spot that it's $150, we know you received the letter. And
Yeah.
so then we can expect that you would have read the whole.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I'm thinking is, honestly, part of that might come down to, you know, we do encourage the application packet to have kind of a cover letter, you know, kind of from the agency, just letting them know about like how the process works at the specific subgrantee, and that honestly part of it might be kind of putting some of that information in there. But I am going to review the statewide things, the statewide communications, and see where there's room for that.
And
So
yeah,
thank you.
you're right. We'll add it to our letters.
Yeah. Yeah, but thank you for putting that on my radar, Ingrid. Rachel.
Okay, I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
On the online application. So last year, when people were using a mobile device, specifically a cell phone, they had a lot more trouble, especially with uploading documents. Has that been addressed at all with rowing?
I cannot speak to that this time. I know that we can, I can definitely get that information and get back to you on that.
Okay, because that when people would call in, that's a lot of times what we'd say. If you're doing it on a cell phone, a lot of times it doesn't want to do that. It wants to do it on an actual computer, not a mobile device.
So this wasn't a case of like user error. This was a known issue.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's good context for me to know.
Okay. And then is there any chance that we can get a copy of the script that 211 is getting so that we know what they're telling the customers? It just will help us in our feedback when we're talking to the customers. What did 211 or what should 211 have said to them, so that we can say, okay, well, they told you this, and it helps me to contact or to comment with them.
That makes sense. I think from a transparency angle, that makes sense. So I do not directly manage that Protiviti agreement. So let me take it back to the people who do manage that and make that request. And I don't foresee any issues with that. I just need to be sure, that everyone's on board with that. And yeah, can definitely let you know once I have an answer on that as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Right. So we are an hour in. We have half an hour left. I don't see any other hands right now. So sorry, Brad.
Yeah, sorry. One just popped up. All right.
Yeah.
So if we're going to start transmittals November 1st, moratorium starts December 1st. A lot of I only have 2 prepay vendors in my area. They require payment until December 1st. Are they protected before December 1st if they are approved on a prepay account?
That is going to depend upon the vendor's internal policies. So I know that some of our vendors, they're great as far as like we already know that they're approved. We're just gonna, we know that they're not gonna be disconnected between now and December 1st. We're just gonna enroll them now. Some of them, not so much. So that definitely is going to depend upon those vendors. I will say, remember that under our policies, you can look at the applicant's average daily usage, and if they have less than $10 of average daily usage, which say their average daily usage is $350 a day, if they have less than $35 in there, you can put a full $500 of crisis in there, full $1,000 if they're total electric. And that should keep them active for that time. So you do have that crisis to fall back on with those prepaid accounts. But yeah, as far as whether they're going to be protected under moratorium as a matter of course because of the timing, I can't issue a blanket answer on that because that really is going to depend on the vendor's specific internal policies.
That is a good point, but their wording is we do not credit their account till we get money in hand.
Send them to vendors at ihcda.in.gov, and we will remind them and educate them on the agreement that they accepted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Dalton.
Like a meeting on it.
Oh. Why did it take her?
Lower your hand. Okay, done it.
Can
You
you
have
hear
a question? Oh yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, we had a mic issue. It's Amber instead of Dalton.
Okay.
We got into the chat a bit late, so I'm
Okay.
not sure if you answered this already. But did we have an estimated date that EAP Connect would be ready to start processing?
We don't have an estimated date yet. We are having weekly meetings with them. Those happen on Wednesdays. Obviously, I'm not going to be part of that tomorrow since we'll be training. But like I said, we are having weekly progress meetings with them. And as soon as we have any information, we will be sharing it with the network.
Okay, great. The only other question I had was, is there going to be a flush benefit for approved clients from the program 2023 year?
There's not.
Okay. All right. Perfect. We've had a lot of people asking us, so now we'll let them know not to look forward to that.
Yeah, if you're done with all of your processing and benefit corrections and everything, you're done.
Okay. Yep. We've all been closed out. Okay. So thank you. I appreciate
Perfect.
it.
Absolutely. And just so you might have missed it, but we will be basically using those funds as carryover to start up program year 2024. We just need to work with legal on extending the contracts.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So we have 26 minutes left. I'm not quite sure how many slides I have left, so I am going to move us forward. All right, policy changes. Application and form submissions. So these aren't really so much changes as just clarifying language on policies that were already there. So an application form may only be signed and submitted by a household member or a person legally authorized to sign on a person's behalf, such as a power of attorney. And if a third party is signing or submitting on a household's behalf, the documentation of that legal authority is required to be part of the client file, the application file. This does apply to physical paper applications as well as online submissions. However, this does not apply to telephonic applications in which LSP intake staff or productivity staff are actually obtaining the verbal consent to the terms of the certification statement. Note that this does apply not just to applications, but to all supporting documentation and client-facing forms. And intake must take care to check signatures on submitted documents. Simplified recertification. This policy has been removed from the program year 2024 manual, and the simplified recertification form is no longer included in the forms and appendices. ICDA will explore in the future whether simplified recertification could be reintroduced, but we will only do so if it can be shown to actually reduce burden in a meaningful way for both applicants and intake staff. No changes to regular benefits this year. We're keeping all the matrix points as they were. Crisis benefit changes. Beginning in program year 2024, outstanding arrearages that are being managed with a payment arrangement, payment agreement, or payment extension, different vendors use different terminology there, will be eligible for crisis assistance, whether the applicant is current with their agreement or not. So what this means is that encouraging an applicant to enroll in a payment arrangement or helping them negotiate a payment arrangement will remain an acceptable method for crisis mitigation. However, in the past, we've kind of used that as crisis mitigation and then said, well, but now you don't get crisis. With this new policy change, we will be able to assist them with additional funding rather than just kicking the can down the road on their outstanding balance. The maximum crisis amount per household is going to remain the same, $500 per utility, $1,000 per household. And if applicant heats with an installed electric heating source, such as baseboard heaters or an electric furnace, they may receive up to $1,000 in crisis toward the electricity, since they'll be getting both the electric crisis and the heating crisis. Clients may still come back once after the initial application approval to use any crisis funding that is not used at the time of approval. For this year, the income eligibility will continue to be based on 60% of state median income. We will not switch over to 150% of federal poverty guidelines. For the most recent state median income, household of 4 state median income is $95,373. So here are our new income guidelines for basic eligibility at the 45 to 60% level. And the manual has a breakdown for the under 30% and the 30 to 45% as well. Wood and biofuels, and this is following up on a policy guidance that was issued mid-year last year, but due to concerns about health and safety, kerosene is no longer considered a safe indoor residential heating fuel and is not eligible for EAP benefits. ERR changes. So the ERR cap, has been changed to just a $7,000 average cost per unit. Rather than requiring agencies to choose between doing an average cost per unit or a strict per household cap. Now, how you enforce that average cost per unit cap is up to you. And so, if you choose, an agency may choose to enforce that ACPU by implementing, on their end, a strict per household cap. But we do encourage you to allow yourselves flexibility for addressing more complex or costly situations. Secondly, the ERR eligibility period has been extended. Rather than being November 1st through March 15th, is now November 1st through March 20th, or whenever applications close on a given year. And ERR work may not begin before November 1st, but you may begin doing preparatory work, including completion of consent forms and assessments prior to November 1st. Emergency services changes. This is also pursuant to a policy guidance change that was issued mid-year. So emergency services benefits may be awarded when an applicant experiences increased usage of a utility as a result of an emergency event. The emergency event may be a natural disaster, extreme cold weather conditions, or a documented medical emergency that explicitly requires the use of electrical medical equipment in the home. Any natural disasters must be documented through a declaration of emergency from an elected municipal, county, state, or national official. Qualifying extreme cold weather conditions may be documented through a severe weather alert issued by the National Weather Service, or a declaration from an appropriate state, county, or municipal elected official. And note that this does specifically relate to extreme weather conditions causing health and safety concerns, not to travel advisories or travel restrictions related to snowfall or ice accumulation. Medical emergencies may be documented by documentation of a medical event and the need to maintain home medical equipment from a medical professional. Maintenance of previously existing chronic medical conditions will not in itself qualify as an emergency event for the purposes of this benefit. Emergency services funds may be awarded within 30 days of a documented emergency event or the expiration of a declaration of a state of emergency. And the applicant must provide a rationale for how the emergency event led to the increased usage, and the LSP is to document this in the case file. This could be as simple as just documenting a verbal statement of what the rationale was. Finally, with emergency services, because the benefit is focused on increased usage, the LSP must ensure that they use a billing statement showing usage during the event, that it is within 30 days of the event or the expiration of the state of emergency declaration, and that you are using the current usage rather than any past due usage in order to determine the benefit amount. There are some changes in the monitoring section. So the first change is that bonus points are no longer being awarded. This is to make the EAP monitoring process similar to federal monitoring processes. But on the other hand, the threshold for improvement plans is being adjusted. So an overall performance score of 85% or above is now being considered to be in good standing. If the overall performance score is between 80 to 84.99%, the agency qualifies for participation in a modified quality improvement plan. And any overall performance score below 80% will qualify an agency for participation in a quality improvement plan. And once again, the improvement plans are implemented at the discretion of the ICDA EAP program manager. So just because you fall within the range where you do qualify for some sort of improvement plan, that doesn't necessarily mean 100% that you will be placed on an improvement plan. There, we do have discretion there, usually based on what the findings are. And remember that the manual is intended to address fundamental policies regarding EAP eligibility and the most common scenarios and issues that subgrantees may encounter. So if intake or agency management encounters a situation that falls outside of explicit guidance that's found in the manual, then you are encouraged to use the concepts contained within the manual and to apply those concepts to that situation. And if after applying those concepts, the solution to the situation is still unclear, or if you've come to a determination, but you're really kind of unsure about it, then then we encourage you, please, please, please reach out to ICDA via the LIHEAP inbox, and we'd be happy to provide clarification. And we do encourage you to bring those questions to us whenever you have them, because if we see similar questions coming up multiple times from different agencies, then that will alert us that there is definitely a larger need in the network, and we can work on creating a policy guidance or a future manual revision in order to address any uncertainty or a lack of clarity there. Right. Does anyone have any questions now? Ingrid.
So I just want to clarify this. If somebody is in a payment agreement, we can assist with crisis funding.
100%.
Hooray.
Right? Yeah, it's, I understand the rationale behind not qualifying the payment plans for crisis, but I think what we've seen time and again is it just kicks the can down the road, and once they catch up with that can, they're usually in a worse off situation than they were when they started kicking that can. So let's, the idea was, let's not set our applicants up for an even worse future crisis. Let's just address what we can now. So, Rachel.
Okay, so my question is regarding the signatures. So let's say I've got, because this happens a lot with us, you've got a gentleman who lives alone, but his handwriting's not the best, or he can't see the best. So his daughter will come in, or a home health aide will come in, and they'll fill out the application for them. They're not technically a power of attorney.
They can fill out. They can fill out. They cannot sign on his behalf.
So he still needs to sign it once they've completed it.
If he does not have a power of attorney that's legally authorized to sign a legal document on his behalf, then he absolutely must sign. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Because he's accepting a certification statement that specifically states that I'm attesting under the penalties of fraud and perjury that the above is true. A home health aide does not have the authority to accept that kind of statement on his behalf.
Okay.
Good question. Laura.
Hi. I believe you said that the ERR program was extended through March 20th. Did you mean May 20th?
If I said March, I definitely meant to say May. It's until the end of the program year. Yes.
Okay.
Until the end of the application period.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Rosa.
I got a few of them. You said the recertification was gone.
Yes.
So that does not include like the photo ID, the social security cards, stuff like that, correct? That's just income?
Right. Yeah. So you can still pull those social security cards and photo IDs forward from previous applications if you have them. Basically, all this does is, so for people who are on fixed income, you're going to need to get the updated income. When we looked at it, I mean, I think we've been talking about this for a few years now. It really didn't save that much work on the applicant's end, because in addition to signing this recertification form, we still needed the signed application. So they still needed to complete an application. The only thing it was saving them from was providing the social security card and a photo ID, which you're already able to pull forward for anyone. And it was saving them from having to provide the income documentation. It really wasn't saving a lot of work on their end. It was saving almost no work on their end. And it was, I think in most cases, creating more work on intake's end.
Yes.
So it just, it made sense, I think, to especially since a lot of applicants didn't quite understand it and felt like, well, if I sign this paper, I shouldn't have to fill out the application. So it would, then create additional follow-up, I think usually. It didn't make sense to continue it. And like I said, we're committed to reducing burden where we can. So I think it's something that's on the table for us in the future to reintroduce, but we want to make sure it's actually going to make a difference. And like I said, for me personally, it's important that it makes a difference both for the applicant and for the intake.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
One more question, and I'm gonna go back to the credit agreement in crisis.
Sure.
How would we determine how much crisis they can get if they're on a credit agreement?
Yeah, so I mean, the bill hopefully is providing a breakdown of what the of what their arrangement balance is. And so it goes back to that maximum of 500 per utility. And if an applicant has a bill showing that their remaining arrangement balance is $422, then you give them $422 in crisis. If they're total electric and they're showing $1,500, they get 1,000.
Okay. Are you okay if I find one and just kind of throw you my thoughts? See if I'm okay with it. If I'm good with it.
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just
And
want
we
to make
know
sure I
that
do it right.
we know that this is a sea change. We know that this is our major policy change for the year. So we want to be sure everyone kind of understands it and is on board with it. And yeah, we're happy to help look at examples and talk through it and make sure that that we're empowering you guys to assess it and get it right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Angela.
I just wanted to clarify, after moratorium, if somebody's in a payment arrangement and let's say the crisis doesn't cover it, do we have to require the client to pay the remainder, or does that payment arrangement still consider their continuation of services?
Sorry, run that by me one more time. Angela, I think you remuted yourself.
It did. Sorry about that. So after moratorium, if they owe, let's say 800 and we can only give them 500 on crisis on that payment arrangement, are we required to make the client pay the remaining 300, or does that payment arrangement guarantee continuation of services?
Yeah, it sounds to me like the crisis itself was already mitigated, so that does guarantee that continuation of services. Unless it's been defaulted on and now they're saying we need the entire balance immediately, you can mitigate what is available to them at that point.
Perfect.
Thanks. And yeah, sorry, Angela Schmeng. I hadn't realized that Angela Spurgeon also had her hand up. So Angela Schmeng.
I just wanted to clarify something on the payment arrangements. So when we're looking at their payment arrangement, do we go off of what is due or the total amount that is due?
The total amount of the arrangement balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Julie.
Hey, yes. So at first glance, I really like the new policy about not requiring clients to pay a portion during moratorium. But it feels to me a little bit like it could be kicking the can down the road. So, we use, if they heat with something other than electric and they have a $1,000 disconnect on their electric, so we pay 500 in crisis plus the 150. So that leaves that additional not paid, but they're safe from being disconnected until March 15th, but March 16th, they're not, and there's no longer crisis. Is it really that simple? Like, we don't need documentation or notes. It's just assumed that because it's under moratorium, there was no conversation about paying that additional portion.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that that's where there's a bit of nuance there, right? So I think that that's where, you know, if you're set up where you have staff who can provide some sort of guidance or counseling, I think if you do that, if you encourage them to make a payment, like kind of explain to them, here's what we're able to do, but here's the potential consequences. I think documenting that conversation whenever possible is very helpful. But yeah, I think from the LIHEAP standpoint, you know, our big thing is making sure that we continue that service. You know, and we don't want to we don't want to inadvertently cause more trauma or stress with the applicant by telling them like, well, you know, we you still might get shut off because we're not going to make a pledge or a benefit to you because you know your balance is this much and you need to pay something on it, when they might not be in a position to be able to do that at that time. And we know that because we're fortunate enough to have the moratorium, they're not actually in danger of being disconnected, you know, until March 15th.
Okay,
Does that make
gotcha.
sense?
Thanks. Yeah, it does. And
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. It just worries me come March 16th, but I guess it's maybe all the same one way or the other. So, okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thank you. Ingrid.
So I wanted to say something about the question that was just brought up. I mean, the policy says that our benefits have to stop a disconnection. It doesn't say that it has to pay the bill. And so, you know, the full bill. So if it's during the moratorium, even a regular benefit, and we still give crisis, but even a regular benefit would stop the disconnection. So we'd never made that requirement during the moratorium if they still had active service. And so I
Right.
just thought I would address that part because the policy just says we stop the disconnection, not that we pay the whole bill. And I realize we're kicking the can down the road by doing that, but you know, sometimes we do our part as much as we can. So that was the one thing. Then my other comment, and it has to do with the payment arrangement. Could we not base the benefits that we pay on the original disconnect notice that the payment arrangement was based on, not just the amount that's owed at the time we process the application? Because if you think about it, we give crisis dollars in October, even though that doesn't stop the disconnection. And the thought behind that is we're providing as much of a benefit as we can because we're allowed to. And so if we could base the crisis dollars on the disconnect notice that caused the client to make the payment arrangement, again, we would be able to give them as much of a benefit as we can, you know, and cover them. And that would be very clear documentation, because what if the client made a payment yesterday, but it hasn't shown up on their payment arrangement? And so then we may give an amount that's different from what they actually owed. But if we can base it on the disconnect notice, we actually have a document to back up the amount that we gave them.
So are you asking, basically, say someone applies in October and they have a payment arrangement they've been on for 3 months, that we would use the May bill? Or October? No, sorry, July bill. Is that kind of what you're proposing?
Yeah, I am, because let's
Okay.
face it, if they're in a payment arrangement in October from a disconnect notice from July or whenever, we know they're going to be back in the same boat. You know, our clients are going to be, there's a good chance they'll be in the same boat again in March. So why not give
Right.
them as much as we can when they come to us that first time, and possibly just go, there isn't anything else we can do because you've received the $500 crisis.
I'm going to say for now that we need to stick to our kind of underlying policy of we use the utility bill that's most recent and appropriate for the date of application. But I'll give it some extra thought. But for now, let's keep it the current bill or account statement at the time of application.
Okay, so we still would then need, can we verify the amount that's due on the payment arrangement via phone with the utility company and just document that? Because I think with some of the vendors, if they're in a payment arrangement, that's not going to be clear on their bill. And so as long as we can put a note in the system and say, her AEP, this is what's owed on the payment arrangement, as long as that's sufficient, I think we'll be okay. I'm just trying to figure out a way for us to have something in writing.
Yeah, if it's not clear, you can clarify it. And you know what? I'm realizing it's 11:30 and we haven't even gotten to form changes. So because we actually have a new form that's going to help with this. Yeah, there's form changes. Hold that thought, Ingrid. Let's get through the next two questions, and if everyone has, I can probably get through form changes in about 5 minutes. If I want to be respectful of time, but if everyone can give me another 5-10 minutes, I can probably get through this. All right, Brad, we're on speed round for the rest of these questions.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just want to add on to Ingrid. I see what she's saying. I really do, but I just pulled one. So if you're going to look at the plan balance, if the customer's already made payments, we're not looking at that. So like if they are on a 3-month, 6-month agreement, we're not looking at what they've actually paid. This is helping me for training purposes. So you're saying, forget if they made payments to that agreement, ignore it. You want the plan balance that's left.
Well, yeah, what's the balance of what they have to pay for that agreement? Yes.
Okay. And I agree with you, because if we go back to whatever month and grab a disconnect, they've already made payments to that agreement. So we're actually giving them more money, in my thought. So thank you.
Absolutely. And Jessica.
Sorry, it's actually Stacy. I'm just on Jessica's computer.
Oh, okay. Hey.
Okay, so payment arrangements. With those, are we treating them as a crisis and working them within 14 days?
I don't think it qualifies them as being in crisis. I think it just qualifies them for the crisis benefit.
Okay.
So basically their crisis, their immediate need is already mitigated as a result of that. This just basically qualifies them for additional benefit, but does not make them crisis for your, we need to do something to mitigate right away, because it's already mitigated. And you can document that's already mitigated because there is a payment arrangement and they are not subject to an immediate disconnection.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lisa, I see your hand. I'm going to get through these form changes real quick and then come back to you. Is that all right? All right, form changes. So we are going to have our same appendices that we had last year. They are all going to be updated with the exception of federal LIHEAP statute and Indiana moratorium legislation, which of course, neither of those has changed. Lists of forms, essentially the same. Everything is going to be updated with minor changes for 2024. So all forms and appendices have been updated and renamed. Many forms have had minor changes to them, especially with the end of LIHWAP and enhanced federal reporting requirements. So everyone should be sure to remove previous versions of forms and appendices from their websites, from their internal archives, from any filing cabinets they may be hiding in, recycle, burn, pulverize, vaporize, whatever, any existing hard copies that you may have, and ensure that only 2024 forms are being used this year. All right, so the first new form that we have here is a request for utility and fuel account information. So this basically takes a lot of the stuff that I think some of you were having to do with some of your vendors to get client account information, especially if it's a new account or if they just don't have a billing statement. And this standardizes it, so you have a form to use. So this form can be used to retrieve necessary fuel and utility account information when the applicant is unable to provide an account statement or when the utilities account statement does not provide the necessary information. You basically put the applicant information at the top, have the applicant signed that they are authorizing their utility or fuel provider to release the information, and send this off to the utility fuel provider. It's a lot like a request for earnings statement or a landlord affidavit in that respect. Next, the IVA has been redesigned to make it easier to use, and we hope that this will result in less follow-up with applicants. So you'll be getting a copy later, but as you can see, we've eliminated an entire section from it. We've basically combined section 1 and 2 into a single section. We have pre-populated the dates. The current version actually is a little bit different than this version. I think it makes it even more clear. It actually puts the year in automatically and it kind of gives the timeline for the program year and when people would be applying. So since the earliest that people would be applying is August, our timeline here I think begins with July with May. So then people who are applying in August, they can claim their May, June, and July right at the beginning of that timeline. So it actually follows the timeline of when people might be applying as opposed to a regular calendar year of January through December. And for the section where they explain how they managed to meet required expenses, we've turned that into checkboxes rather than having them pre-populate, or, kind of free form populate. We put a checkbox in there. It might be difficult to see, but to check here if all of the needs were met through the income of a parent, spouse, partner, or roommate in the household. And we just gave checkboxes for each of the different categories and only asked them to fill in an amount if they were basically if they received their assistance by a family or friend giving them money directly. Hopefully this makes it easier. Hopefully it makes for a lot less need for follow-up with applicants. And once again, those will be distributed within the next week or two. I think that's the end of this presentation now. So I will take some final questions before we break. Lisa, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, I just had a question about the payment arrangement. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. When we get a payment arrangement in as a bill, it's not considered crisis, correct?
Right. It's not considered a crisis in terms of you having to mitigate it within
Right.
48 hours.
We don't automatically give them money. We just process it as normal.
Right. And they do qualify for an additional crisis benefit basically in order to prevent them from going into an immediate crisis need.
So even though we're not processing them ahead of other people, when we get to that bill that shows a payment arrangement, are we to give them crisis?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. And what if a person's in a payment arrangement and then calls and says, I can't pay my bill, I'm not going to be able to keep this? Can we give them crisis at that time if they've not yet been processed without a disconnect notice?
Yeah. So once they receive an updated account statement showing that, basically saying that, either, you've defaulted and the entire amount is due, or you're now scheduled for disconnect. At that point, that kind of gets escalated to where you actually would be mitigating it.
Right. So as we said, we're going to give them crisis when we get to that application, or it's not going to be put in the crisis, folder to process within 10 days. But if they were to call us and we've not gotten to it yet, and they say, I can't pay the bill, we're still going to say what we've said before. You'll have to default on that, send us a disconnect notice, and then we can help you, correct?
Yeah, you can't really escalate people, for your crisis processing timeline just because they are going to
Okay.
be going into a crisis. Because especially, I know I've been on that side of things. You have so many people who are coming in who do have that disconnection
Mhm.
already scheduled. You can't escalate people just because their disconnection
They
is
say,
going to be
right,
scheduled.
because that happens.
Yep.
Okay, but we can assure them that we will give you extra crisis funding when we get to your application. If between now and then you default, then please let us know.
Yeah, and provide.
Okay.
Yeah, I think at that point, yeah, since we are basing the crisis amount on the on that credit, on that, that arrangement balance still outstanding. I don't know that providing an updated billing statement would qualify for any additional crisis. So yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah,
then
you're
the
good.
utility form. We're required to get bills for clients if they don't give them to us. So,
so this
this
basically
mitigates what?
This makes it easier, especially when. So it makes it easier, especially when someone has opened a new account and they don't have a first bill yet.
Okay.
It standardizes how you get that information, and also technically, it's all the relevant information that would be on a bill. So in theory, that could replace a bill. If someone's not able to get a bill,
Sure.
in theory, you could just send that off to the utility vendor, say, complete this, and then you don't need to worry about having them send you a bill. It
And waiting and
specifies,
having that gap in the that
and it
time frame
specifies
gap.
the application date, and it kind of tells the representative completing it, basically
Okay.
complete this as of the application date above. So
Okay,
it
so
removes
we're
some of
still
that.
getting bills for clients that we don't have to fill this out
Yeah.
in addition. This is just
this
for
is
special situations.
Yeah, or in lieu of, not in addition to.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Yep, absolutely. Ingrid.
Okay, so can we, on that utility form, does it already have a space? I may have missed that, where it asks if it's a prepaid account.
It does not. I can try to
Maybe put it under the utility fuel type,
yeah.
because there seems to be a little space next to it where you could just add prepaid.
Yeah.
Because we have one vendor where they have a code where they know it's a prepaid account, but it's not that easy for a third party to recognize that as prepaid. So that
Sure.
would be helpful.
Yeah, no,
And then
that's good. Sorry, go on.
Well, I interrupted you. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, I was just gonna say that's good feedback. I think that's definitely one thing I didn't think about when I was designing this. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. The other thing is, on the IVA, the one box, it said that they gave or lent the money to them. The thing is, though, if they lent them the money, we wouldn't count it as income, but if they gave them the money, we would. And I know we already struggle with our staff. So if we could add, if we could move the lent under the family friend paid, family friend paid lent for me, then we would know up there we don't count that. But whatever dollar amounts are put in under they gave them the money, then it would make it more obvious that that's the amount that we have to pay, because otherwise we have to determine, was it lent to them or actually given to them?
That's a good point. Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome. That was it.
Okay, cool. Angela.
One more thing on the IVA. On the signature line, you remove for zero income applicant, because sometimes when people are self-declaring, they refuse to sign this.
I've changed it since I designed this slide. It
Perfect.
now says of household member, I believe.
Perfect.
Yep. Brad.
Just real quick, the payment agreements with vendors, Centerpoint is a payment agreement disconnect bill. So if they don't make that payment agreement, it's disconnected. So that would go in our 10-day crisis mitigation.
Okay, yeah. So basically, as long as you have, you know, any vendor that's operating in your territory, if you have knowledge of kind of their quirks of how they operate,
right? I just wanted to
basically
throw that out. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to throw that out to all the LSPs, is because I know with Centerpoint, they are a payment agreement disconnect.
Yeah.
Duke is
Yes.
just a payment agreement. If you break it, the next month's a disconnect. So I just wanted to bring that up. And then Lisa threw something in there on that utility form. Can we, the LSP, fill that in with the vendor over the phone?
Oh, yeah, as long as you get the the person's like contact information, their job title and everything, and you're able to do that, you can kind of make a note that you know document when the phone call was, and basically like just document that that you completed telephonically, kind of like a lot of our other forms.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Julie.
Yeah, so for the utility form, can you eliminate the applicant's signature line? Or does that, that's kind of a barrier on all ends?
Sure. You know, that's a good point, because we do,
With the application being sort
yeah,
of that.
we do have the certification statement that authorizes applicants. I know that some vendors still push back on that, which is why I put that in there. But I am definitely not married to that line being there. I am trying to reduce the need to do additional, burden where we can. So,
Yeah, so I say divorce that line. All right, thanks.
Yep, absolutely. And Stacy, I think you had your hand up again.
Yeah, I did, but you answered it. It was just about signing forms.
Okay, perfect. All right, we are 17 minutes over time. I am very sorry, everyone, but I thank everyone for their patience. I am going to end the recording.